Well, look, the Obama campaign spied on our campaign, and they've been caught, all right? And now let's see what happens to them. But they have been caught. They've been caught red-handed. It's probably treason. It's a horrible thing they did. It probably never happened before. At least nobody got caught doing it. This was all Obama. This was all Biden. These people were corrupt. It's one of the worst things ever to befall this country in terms of political scandal.
Some terrible things happened, and it should never be allowed to happen in our country again.
Donald Trump claims he's unearthed a major political scandal at the heart of the Obama administration.
Obamagate. You know what the crime is. The crime is very obvious to everybody. All you have to do is read the newspapers, except yours.
President Obama will go down as perhaps the worst president in the history of the United States! Exclamation point at real Donald Trump. At least I will go down as a president. I continue to believe Mr. Trump will not be president. And the reason is because I have a lot of faith in the American people.
So it turns out that Obama did mean it when he said that Trump will never be president, but it wasn't because he had faith in the American people. If anything, he and Hillary Clinton showed a gross lack of faith in the American people by hatching a secret plan that's so illegal, so unprecedented in American history, that it sought to actually undo the votes of tens of millions of American citizens.
From the highest levels of the Russian government, clearly from Putin himself, in an effort, as 17 of our intelligence agencies have confirmed, to influence our election.
Was the consensus of all the intelligence agencies and law enforcement.
We have 17 intelligence agencies.
The intelligence communities have concluded, all 17 of them, that Russia interfered with this election. And we all know how that's right.
I am not quoting myself.
No idea.
I am quoting
Hillary, you
17.
have no idea.
17 intelligence. Do you doubt 17
Our
military
country has
and
no
civilian?
idea.
When Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were still in control of the state machinery of the United States government, they weaponized that machinery to try and prevent their opponent from taking office. Despite their opponent winning fair and square. Despite, in other words, tens of millions of American citizens voting for their opponent. And then they actually had the balls to say stuff like this.
To say you won't respect the results of the election, that is a direct threat to our democracy.
Administration has shown it will tear our democracy down if that's what it takes for them to win.
This time, they're determined to succeed in thwarting the will of the people. That's why respected conservatives has called Trump and the extreme MAGA Republicans, quote, a clear and present danger to our democracy.
One of the central foundation stones of a democracy is the idea that you do not allow the politicization of the criminal justice system, the intelligence system, the military.
Yes, that was Obama in 2020 saying that a cornerstone of a democracy, a good, solid democracy, is that you don't weaponize the intelligence community, you don't weaponize the Justice Department against political opponent. He said that with a completely straight face. But I think it takes real balls to say what he says right here.
What happens when the other side has repeatedly and abundantly made clear they are not interested in playing by the rules? It's a problem. And when that happens, we fight. There are going to be times, potentially, when one side tries to stack the deck and lock in a permanent grip on power, using the judiciary, criminal justice system to go after opponents.
So long story short, we finally have definitive proof from the DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, leaking some documents a day or two ago showing that Obama actually instructed his intelligence officials to fabricate evidence that Russia had interfered in the 2016 election to help Trump, that Trump had colluded with Russia to win the election, to steal the election from the Democrat Party.
People who did not want to accept the will of the American people in electing Donald Trump in 2016 and therefore cooked up this treasonous conspiracy to, again, try to effectively, and they did effectively, launch a years-long coup against the sitting president of the United States.
So Trump said for years that Obamagate was a complete scam, that Russiagate was a complete scam, Russia was a hoax.
The whole thing is a scam. The Mueller deal was a scam. The Russian collusion was a scam.
The opinion news, like MSNBC talking heads Rachel Maddow or Joy Reid, pushed it unapologetically, of course. Are you really surprised?
The presidency is effectively a Russian op, right? If the American presidency right now is the product of collusion between the Russian intelligence services and an American campaign.
It's all part of a concerted drive by the president's allies to muddy the waters of the Russia investigation and discredit the dossier, which outlines alleged Russian collusion with the Trump campaign in 2016.
Reporting tonight, the Washington Post says the president still doesn't accept evidence that Russia interfered and supported him in the election, and those around him know he gets agitated when he even hears about it. David, according to the Washington Post, the idea that the president doesn't even want to hear intelligence about Russia's meddling in the election is a stunning thing, and that briefers have to kind of figure out a workaround is really eye-opening.
It's unique, as far as I can tell, in all of American history.
This is something which the entire intelligence community has said, is concerned about. General Michael Hayden, former director of the CIA, says it's the political equivalent, the Russian meddling is the political equivalent of 9/11.
Yes. The meddling itself constituted a direct threat to American democracy.
Until this point, we did not know Obama's involvement. We did not know that it went all the way to the top. Barack Obama himself was about to get a briefing saying we have no evidence. It would go on the record if he had his presidential daily briefing say, we have no evidence of this. He didn't want it to go on the record, so they turned down the briefing. And the very next day, Barack Obama himself instructed his own intelligence officials to make up evidence saying the opposite of what the intelligence officials actually concluded. There is simply no precedent for this level of treason ever in American history.
The word treason has come up. We're seeing a lot of things coming to light these days, and it's very encouraging for Americans, especially this report, which so many of us knew this was a hoax. But this goes all the way to the top. This goes all the way to Barack Obama.
And who can forget this infamous interaction between Donald Trump and Leslie Stahl of 60 Minutes?
Was when they spied on my campaign. They spied on my campaign.
Well, there's no real evidence of that.
Of course there is.
No.
It's all over the place. Leslie,
Sir.
they spied on my campaign.
Trump doubled down by saying they spied on my campaign, which is something we now know to be fact. It's confirmed. It is fact. They used trumped up fake intel, the Steele dossier, which literally came from a Russian spy. Yes, Hillary Clinton herself and Perkins Coie, the law firm, literally were interacting with a Russian spy. And Christopher Steele, former MI6 guy, to get this trumped up travesty, the Steele dossier, to use as pretext to wiretap his campaign. They did. They wiretapped his campaign. They spied on his campaign.
And they got caught.
Can I say something? This is 60 Minutes, and we can't put on things we can't verify.
You won't put it on because it's bad for Biden.
We can't put on things we can't verify.
Leslie, they spied on my campaign.
Well, we can't verify
It's been totally verified.
No.
It's been, just go down and get the papers. They spied on my campaign. They got caught.
No.
And then they went much further than that, and they got caught. And you will see that, Leslie.
And now she is gonna see that, even though she's full of shit. She already knew it was true. I love the sanctimonious, look, this is 60 Minutes. We have high standards here. Good grief. It's actually worth noting that Navy Admiral Mike Rogers, who was head of the NSA under Obama, actually broke the chain of command, went behind Obama's back, and had a private meeting with President-elect Trump at Trump Tower right after the 2016 election. The very next day after that meeting, President-elect Trump moved his operations out of Trump Tower, causing many to speculate that maybe Admiral Mike Rogers warned Trump about the wiretapping, about the spying.
It was the predicate for everything that we're seeing for the past almost 10 years. You started with the Russia hoax. That led to the indictments. That led to the impeachments. That led to the lawfare that we saw for years. We all witnessed it. And you know who was in bed with the Democrats and Obama? The media. This was the same media that was pushing this entire narrative that the president was somehow a Russian asset. We all know it was false. If you look at the confirmation hearings, who got it the worst? Tulsi was one of the people that got it the worst because they knew exactly what she would do.
Yes, Hillary Clinton called Tulsi Gabbard a Russian asset. Never forget that.
Uncovered the biggest scandal in politics, the insane, asinine Russian dossier that we all knew was false, but led to lawfare and indictments and the raiding of his home. Every American should be up in arms right now.
Everybody lied. What do you do in that case? What's the way to handle this going forward? Is it trying this more in the media that wants to keep covering it up? What do you think?
Well, you try it in the media, and guess what the media did? They hired all these people. Brennan, all of these people, they're all hired, MSNBC and CNN. So the media is going to cover for their colleagues, of course.
You guys talked about the Russia hoax nonstop.
The FBI was investigating it. The FBI was investigating it, so we covered them.
And so you took the words of unnamed FBI agents and put them on your network as if they were the gospel truth. You did it again and again. A viewer of your network would have believed that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin conspired in 2016. No. That was totally and preposterously false. No. Well, that's what you just said is false.
President Trump has gone to, quote, extraordinary lengths to keep specifics about his meetings with Russian President Vladimir Putin secret, even keeping them from top members of his own administration. Take a listen to how President Trump responded Saturday night when asked directly if he has ever worked for Russia.
I think it's the most insulting thing I've ever been asked. I think it's the most insulting article I've ever had written.
The president did not directly answer the question. It's a stunning turn of events. Do you think the president of the United States ever worked on behalf of the Russians against American interests?
Speaking of collusion with the media, and might I remind you that January 6, 2017 was when the media put the Russia hoax on blast. They made it what it is, right? So the night before DNI Tulsi Gabbard releases all these documents, guess who is still pushing the Russia hoax?
Well, you spent so much time investigating Donald Trump and sounding the alarm on his misdeeds, the Russia collusion, impeachment.
He can't even get it out. He can't even get it out. The Russia
January 6th.
I wonder why this show got canceled. I can't quite figure it out. And speaking of fired Stephen Colbert, who completely buried The Late Show and destroyed its legacy. Who can forget this moment when he was talking to Claire Danes, who stars in Homeland, the show Homeland, where she's a CIA agent, etc. She talked to a lot of these people and picked their brains. And so she's talking with Colbert on what she learned. And he cuts her off right before she gets to the real meat of her answer.
Yeah, so we park ourselves in a club in Georgetown and talk to like people in the intelligence community, but this year it was all about, you know, the distrust between the administration and the intelligence world, and the intelligence community was suddenly kind of allying itself with journalists, which usually they're not.
How long ago did you start shooting this season?
And the intelligence community was sort of allying itself with journalists, which usually she's trying to say something else and he cuts her off.
The intelligence community was suddenly kind of allying itself with journalists, which usually they're not such good friends.
Which usually they're not such good friends. And Colbert just comes in and he's like, no, who was it that Obama was talking to when Obama said that he wished he could have an earpiece with the next president, Democrat president, he assumes, of course, this is prior to 2016, so that he could unconstitutionally remain president, regardless of the voters' will.
If I could make an arrangement where I had a stand-in, a front man or front woman, and they had an earpiece in, and I was just in my basement in my sweats looking through the stuff, and then I could...
I think it looks familiar. It's bad quality, but you could still make it out, right? It's Stephen Colbert.
Sort of deliver the lines, but somebody else was doing all the talking and ceremony. I'd be fine with that.
Well, it turns out that wasn't such a joke after all, as Susan Rice and others who were very close to Obama were in the White House the entire time throughout the Biden fake presidency. And in fact, Barack Obama was so involved in the Biden presidency, was such a, let's say, a shadow president at the time, earpiece aside, that it was Obama's corner, Obama loyalists who actually pushed Biden out and kicked him to the curb, replacing him with Kamala Harris, and maybe perhaps hoping that Trump wasn't going to be there. You almost have to feel bad for Barack Obama after a certain point, because he actually once mocked presidential candidate Mitt Romney in 2012 for vilifying Russia, for saying that Russia was our biggest enemy. Barack Obama said something to the effect of, the 80s called, they want their foreign policy back.
I mean, I'm glad that you recognize that Al-Qaeda is a threat, because a few months ago, when you were asked what's the biggest geopolitical threat facing America, you said Russia, not Al-Qaeda, you said Russia. And the 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back, because, you know, the Cold War's been over for 20 years. But, Governor, you know, when it comes to our foreign policy, you seem to want to import the foreign policies of the 1980s, just like the social policies of the 1950s and the economic policies of the 1920s.
It's a pretty good debate zinger, can't lie. Barack Obama used to think that vilifying Russia as the chief enemy was just so passé and so 80s and so Cold War and so ick. But this is why you almost have to feel bad for Obama, because the Russia stuff doesn't really fit his MO with how he actually talked about Russia. He used to talk about Russia like they were an insignificant, totally harmless backwater.
The Russians can't change us or significantly weaken us. They are a smaller country, they are a weaker country, their economy doesn't produce anything that anybody wants to buy except oil and gas and arms. They don't innovate, but they can impact us if we lose track of who we are.
But Barack Obama's always been a scammer. Remember that infamous moment in 2012 where he was caught on hot mic saying to Russian President Dmitry Medvedev that this is my last election. After the election, I'll have more flexibility. Of course, this was on sanctions, etc. It was perceived by his opponents as being soft on Russia.
Last election, yeah. And after my election, I have more flexibility. Yeah. I understand. I transmit this information to Vladimir and understand.
There are plenty of moments when Obama would be seen laughing jovially with Vladimir Putin.
Para México es un honor ser anfitrión y encabezar la cumbre de líderes del G20 aquí en nuestro país.
So how did we get from that to the Russia hoax? Well, it's because Hillary Clinton lost the election. Hillary Clinton is also a much older baby boomer than Barack Obama. She's always had kind of an 80s swag anyway. She desperately wanted a distraction from her email scandal, and she wanted to undermine the election of a legitimate president. She called Trump an illegitimate president for years.
The director of national intelligence reveals startling new details about the Russian collusion hoax against President Donald Trump. And as one of America's Pearson Sharp explained, senior Obama officials were working hard to cover up Hillary Clinton's email scandal and undermine the 2016 election.
The chickens are coming home to roost. The director of national intelligence, John Ratcliffe, has finally declassified documents revealing the origins of Hillary Clinton's scheme to falsely connect presidential candidate Donald Trump to the phony Russian collusion scandal. And in what must come as a surprise to absolutely no one, she did it all as, quote, a means of distracting the public from her use of a private email server before the 2016 elections. That's a direct quote from former CIA Director John Brennan himself. But even more importantly, and this can't be overstated, Brennan told President Obama all about it.
I think John Brennan has turned out to be such a partisan, such a sort of vituperative critic of the president, and I do really am concerned about having so many people now in the intelligence community that have come out with real partisan views while they're at work. I mean, when people are plotting at work to try to prevent President Trump from being president, that's a problem.
So to boil it down, the former president of the United States knew that the CIA, the FBI, and other top officials who worked for him were conspiring to sabotage a presidential candidate, undermining the democratic election process.
Now, this is an old video from maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So today, as of a day ago, we know that it wasn't just Obama having knowledge of John Brennan and James Clapper falsifying evidence against Trump. We now know that they were instructed explicitly by Barack Obama. You know, maybe Obama just felt really bad for Hillary Clinton's humiliating loss to President Trump, and so he tried to throw her a bone, and he went along with this bullshit scam. There's some evidence in all these documents that they were still in cover your ass mode. There's a lot of language in there that makes them sound scared, in other words. I guess hell hath no fury like a woman rejected by the American public.